Ryanair, Neil Sorahan. Neil, talk to us about the summer pricing picture. We know there's capacity constraints, so on some lines it's unusual to see a forecast around flat to marginally higher pricing. Why is that, and when do you see that story turning around?
Yeah, you're right, Tom. You know, we've got the Pratt & Whitney GTF issue is going to take a lot of A320s out of the market. Boeing and Airbus are running behind on deliveries and will likely continue to do so out into the 2030s. So, you know, one would anticipate that pricing would maybe be a bit ahead of where it is at the moment. That said, you know, we're going to grow by traffic by 9% this year to almost 200 million passengers. And we're guiding fares in the peak summer months flat to modestly up, and that's on top of a 21% fare increase last year. But at the moment, we are having to stimulate midweek traffic a bit more than we would have anticipated. Weekends, very strong. But I'd anticipate that, you know, with the schools closing in the next few weeks, that we'll start to see the midweeks close out as well. But we're taking in over 600,000 bookings a night. So demand is huge, and my advice would be to yourself, Tom, and everybody else, book sooner rather than later, because I think fares are only going to go in one direction.
Well, for a bit more detail on that, Neil, then, and we'll take that advice on board. Where do you see more positive price pressure coming through for you in the business in the quarters ahead? When does that become more substantial?
Well, I mean, the peak months for us are the July, August, September, and they're booking well at the moment, albeit that we'd only have, you know, over 30% of those bookings in place at this point in time, which is not unusual for the time of year. But we would anticipate that they'll be very strong into the summer. So that's why we're saying fares flat to modestly up into the peak summer months.
OK, so you're booking, what, just above 30% for the summer season so far for Ryanair. I think we were speaking to EasyJet last week. They said about 39% for the summer season. Neil, in terms of the deliveries, there's another line crossing from the earnings story then around Ryanair saying there's a risk, you've said, and you and the team, there's a risk that there's further slowdown in deliveries of those Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Can you give us a bit more detail on that? We'd heard that you had maybe 2 or 3 that could be delivered by June. Is that still on track?
Yeah, as things stand, we would hope to have 158, maybe if we're lucky, 160, 161 game changers in the fleet by the end of July. That's roughly 20, 23 aircraft shy of where we had hoped to be at that point in time. But we're very pleased with how things are going with Boeing at the moment. The new management team, led by Stephanie Pope in Seattle, are producing higher quality aircraft, and the consistency of deliveries is getting better. So, you know, I'd be hopeful that we'll be closer to 160 aircraft by the end of July, and then, you know, we'll hopefully catch up the shortfall of 20 aircraft by November time frame, which means there's only 29 aircraft left in our 210 aircraft order for the game changers, and they'll come in ahead of summer of 2025, and then hopefully by 27 we start taking delivery of the first of our 300 aircraft order for the MAX 10s.
Neil, you're announcing as well a €700 million buyback. Is that where you're leaning in the quarters ahead as well? Do you want to be returning more cash to shareholders rather than looking at M&A? Talk to us about the rationale behind that.
Yeah, well, we've been very clear. I mean, our capital allocation policy is very straightforward. First priority was to restore pay for our people after COVID, and then introduce pay increases for them, pay down lots of debt, and you know, we paid down over $1 billion in debt last year, and to fund ourselves out of our own cash resources, and we funded our $2.4 billion in capital expenditure last year out of cash. So to the extent that we've surplus cash thereafter, we said we would return it to the shareholders. We implemented a regular dividend policy last November, and this morning we're delighted to say that we'll be buying back $700 million worth of shares. Ryanair's traditionally participated in buying low-cost aircraft at the right time. We've got a very good order book. You know, we've got the 300 game changers, which will underpin our growth to 300 million passengers over the next decade. Okay. And we don't tend to participate in M&A unless it brings something that we can't necessarily achieve quickly ourselves.
Okay. Neil, we've got to leave it there. Really appreciate your time.